Welcome everybody to this hearing. I am Robert Harris. I will be chairing today's hearing. Our witness is Dr. Ben Knighton. I'd like to also welcome my fellow commissioners on this hearing today. There's Will Jones and Ian Shelley. Ben, can I ask you to start us off by giving a summary of what you would like to talk about and what you've experienced, what the issues are that you would like to bring to this panel, and if possible, if you could limit your summary to between 5 and 10 minutes. Following this summary, we will of course have a number of questions for you. Could I ask you to begin, please?
Well, I noticed that Bournemouth Pool and was it Camford? No, Christchurch Council were arbitrarily introducing a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit. And when I looked at the press statement, amongst other factors that were discussed, well, they weren't discussed. It was found that, based on a council travel survey report, that certain types were more often going to clog up the traffic of in the council area. One of these being Christians. So I went to look at the travel survey report, and there was very little ground for making such a claim. A claim, of course, which they put through the Equality Act 2010. So the minority involved had to be favoured instead of others, or the majority of Bournemouth residents. So this was a very peculiar process. Now, looking at the travel survey report, it is interesting that they give different weightings of the numbers of actual respondents. So the number of Christians responding was 1,692, while the 1,685, while the number of no religions was 1,483. Now, with no clear criteria for weighting these numbers, they come out as no religion 1692, Christian respondents 1,445. So they have reversed the actual figures by their weighting. This is suspicious. Now, their claim that Christians more often use car is based on a questionnaire, and they found, and I'm not questioning the figures here, except for the weighting that has already been done. No religion traveled by car at 77%, while Christians traveled by car as driver, this is, by 83%. So there's a marginal discrepancy here. But when you look at those traveling by car as a passenger, 48% of non-religious people did so, compared with 45% of Christians. So what we deduce from this is that Christians are more likely to drive, and therefore less likely to be passengers. Then there is travel by bus. Not non-religions, 23% have been traveling by bus, compared with 24% of Christians. Then there is travel by foot, of which 74% of no religions have been traveling by foot, and 73% of Christians. So we need this typologizing of Christians as being the most likely to be responsible for the car traffic in Bournemouth is a pretty uncertain business, and no rigorous statistical tests have been applied to these percentages. They also preface the survey with Christians being significantly older than those of no religion or other religion. Other religions are relatively insignificant in the proportion of respondents to the survey, whereas those of no religions are what are foregrounded. So Christians being older, of course, are more likely, if they can, to be using a car rather than bicycle or foot. And Christians are lower on the bicycle front. That's all can be said where there's a significant difference. But then if you're looking at pensioners, and Bournemouth is famed for its pensioners, then you wouldn't expect so many to be travelling by bicycle. So the characterization of Christians in the cancelled document seen by the press is simply unfair and misleading. As I said, there are very many characteristics there with which I take issue with the council, on gender, etc., etc. But there appears to be here a clear bias against Christians. Why are they picked on? In the responses I had from the council, they really do not deal with the Christian issue. They simply cite the importance of equality. But whose equality, whose privilege, and why?
Thank you. Is that your? Have you finished, Sven? Is that your summary?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Before I ask the question that I wanted to start with, can we just provide some wider context here for our viewers and just for the panel primarily? So, I understand, and please correct me if I have this right, that the goal of the council, their stated goal, is to possibly introduce a 20-mile-per-hour limit for vehicles within, I think, two towns within the Bournemouth, Christchurch, and Poole area, and that
The whole of the council area.
the whole area. Okay. and that the travel survey, which we will be referring to, is not in and of itself the evidence that they're using to possibly, advance that goal, but it certainly feeds into that longer term objective. Is that your understanding?
Well, the travel survey report was done a few years before. You then have a council decision coming up, and it is expressly using that report to justify the decision they're making on the speed limit.
Yes, and I understand that I think they say in one of the documents that there's going to be two lots of consultation on this issue. Um,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah, yes. They say they're going to have another one and let people have their say. But I mean, justification for the decision that has been taken um, is based on this biased reading of their own report.
yes. So I'd like to look at this report. Its full title is the Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole Travel Survey. And on page 57, there's information about the breakdown of respondents cited within the survey. For the category of religion, this broad class is divided into three subcategories. The first is no religion, as you cited
Yep,
earlier. The second is Christian, and the third, other religions.
yep,
So, of all the religions in the country, only one is cited by name.
yes,
Now, it may be if the council were giving a justification for this, they may possibly be saying that they didn't cite all the other religions, but chose to just say other religions because that figure for that category of people was significantly smaller than the Christians. That's just a possible way of understanding it. Did
yes.
you?
And I say I'm not beefing about other religions. The main contrast is I don't know how the survey or how they picked up the respondents that they did. The So what we have from the report is um, no religion contrasted with Christian.
But can I ask you, the fact that they don't name other religions, it's just this broad brush, vague category of other religions. Do you have any concerns about that? Because only one religion is being named here, namely Christian. Others aren't named specifically. Did you raise that with the council? Do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, the figures speak for themselves. There was only 102 um, self-expressing their non-Christian religion, as against about 1,500 for the two other groups. So um, uh, I, I'm I'm not particularly fussed by that. Um, but to again, and it would appear the other religions are in general poorer, have less access to cars, but if they are of recent immigration status, then that's precisely what you would expect, and also if they are younger. So I'm not particularly bothered with the other religions there
Okay,
because they're not significant. I mean, maybe there are 60 Muslims and 30 Hindus and so forth, but um, it's the comparison with Christian and no religion, which
okay,
of course would also go with the contrast that is made at one point between Christians and other sexualities, rather than Christians with other religions who would also be less likely to have other sexual orientations.
okay. Then thank you. I have one other question about this. So, in a letter to you, the council said, and I quote, Like other local authorities, BCP Council has legal obligations as part of the Equality Act 2010. It is against the law to discriminate against someone because of a protected characteristic. And then they go on to say, in accordance with this act, all council policy and decisions are developed and informed by an equalities impact assessment, more widely known as an EIA. Um, what comments do you have about how they attempt to justify this?
I think that it's a misuse of the Act because the intention of the Equality Act is to ban discrimination between individuals. It, it, it says nothing about um, treating various large groups differently, privileging minorities in general over majorities or vice versa. And it's interesting, in fact, that according to their weighting, there are more no religion people um, than Christians. So, why do they pick out Christians as the offender in terms of um, using cars?
But the thing is, can I just go on a bit further about this? So in their letter, they reject the claim that they are discriminating, and they say it is discriminatory to highlight how a proposal may differentially impact people with different characteristics, as it is under a legal duty to consider that. So
Yeah,
they are
yes,
trying
but the
to argue.
Equality Act is about individuals, not um, significant populations.
Can I, Robert, can I come in there?
Yes.
The Equality Act imposes a public sector equality duty on public sector bodies to take into account people's protected characteristics in all their in all their policies and policy making. It also has a whole section devoted to positive action, or two sections devoted to positive action, or what we might call positive discrimination, where there's a duty to take, or at least an option to take into account people's if people are an underrepresented minority when they're appointing people for employment and other things. So
Yes, but that applies to the appointment of individuals. There should not be discrimination, and I don't think it commends positive discrimination.
well, it's a whole section about, it calls it positive action, and it authorizes the use of positive action for appointing underrepresented minorities to positions of employment. Uh, is where between
You'll have to bring up chapter and verse on that.
it's section 128, I think, or 129. I can look it up. And they've got a public sector equality duty to take into account the impact on people's protected characteristics, and as a public sector body, they'll be very conscious of wanting to comply with that public sector equality duty.
Which sections?
Do you want me to look at that now? Okay. So if we Google public sector equality duty, that is in
49.
Section 149, I think. Yeah.
149.
149, I think. Yeah. I'm just, yeah, section 149. And I believe that positive action is in section 128 and 129, maybe. Yeah, the Equality Act is not, unfortunately, simply a requirement to not discriminate between individuals. It has some quite strong positive action and more general rules about so-called underrepresented minorities.
Yeah. Um, I really think the council will be struggling under a court of law to justify their their decision in terms of Section 149.
Yeah, I haven't looked into it, but that's I guess that's how they would do it. May I ask a question, Robert?
And especially as when they've weighted it, Christians are in a minority. So why should they be demonized?
Yeah.
In
Can
terms
I
of
just
traffic?
this is widening out to many relevant points. I just wanted to mention one other thing, and then I will pass over to Will. Um, in their travel survey, or it may be in the correspondence with the council claims that they are drawing on the data from all the 9 groups who have protected characteristics in law. Although I note when the different categories of respondents are presented at the end of the travel survey, there are 3 categories of people with protected characteristics who are not listed, namely those with gender reassignment, 2 though marriage and civil partnership, and 3 pregnancy and maternity. Did you raise this omission with the council, or if not, what would you like to say about that?
Um, well, you can see, but what I've written, I haven't um, gone into every protected characteristic, and I really don't know how, in practice, a council could operate a policy for its whole population based on each protected characteristic. It's simply impractical when you're dealing with hundreds of thousands of people as Bournemouth.
Okay. Will, you want to develop your questions further? Do you
And
want
I
to
don't know how a
proceed?
court would deal with that either.
Mm.
Thanks, Robert. Yeah, so I've just looked it up. It's section 158 and 159 to deal with positive action. That's the theme of those 2 sections. So it's worth looking at those. So I wanted to ask Ben, thank you first of all for coming for joining us today and telling us about what happened to you. So first of all, can you just say a bit more about how you felt when you came across this this these assertions about the the groups that were more likely to
Well,
oppose this problem
I
and
found it offensive because it was stereotyping um, a number of groups to which I happen to belong as the people causing the traffic problem in Bournemouth. And I have driven in Bournemouth, and I have a friend in Bournemouth. So I do have some local knowledge. I'm male, I'm Christian, etc., etc. So um, it's offensive to pick out without justification these features in order to adopt a highly controversial policy.
okay. Did you feel discriminated against, would you say?
Sorry,
Would you say you felt discriminated against?
I can't hear.
Would you say you felt discriminated against?
I'm not too fond of the discrimination discourse precisely because it produces so many problems and anomalies. Which minority, which group do you privilege over another? Whose rights are to be accepted and whose rights to be downgone? Um, in this instance, it certainly appears to be discriminatory against Christians, which is which is daft. But it's not a question of discrimination so much as why are you trying to base your whole policy for hundreds of thousands of people on the basis of whether one is Christian or not. Traffic is not a religious matter.
Right. So why do you think, from what they said, that they brought up someone being that the being people being Christian? Why did they bring it up, and why do you think they brought it up?
I certainly think that this was a certain bias and tendency amongst the council staff. Of course, I'm not in a position to know what decision-making process was behind closed doors. You've already pointed out they didn't pick on all the um, categories of possible discrimination in the Equality Act. Um, and so why they um, included Christian amongst the people who were clogging up the traffic of Bournemouth is is a question they would need to answer. They cannot justify it from their own survey report.
And what was the okay? So that's in terms of their personal motivation. What did they from the report? What they said? Why did they say they were bringing it up? I'm just trying to understand why it's even
I,
come up at all.
One can only guess at their motivation. I've already said at one point they contrast other sexual orientations um, with Christian. So maybe there is a woke or an LGBT agenda there to hit Christians.
Right. So in your view, it's not clear why they brought up Christians, but you suspect some unspoken motives that were unhelpful,
Yes, because
discriminatory.
if the council officers shared the allegiances of Bournemouth, Christchurch, and Poole, they wouldn't try to stereotype Christians as being the big problem in traffic.
Sorry to interrupt here. Can I just read the sentence that is the focus of this discussion from the report itself? Because we haven't actually had recourse to that. So it does say the profile of people who proportionately drive more: men, middle age groups, people without a disability, white, British, heterosexuals, and Christians will generally consider their freedoms associated with driving are being compromised, though individual views may vary. I just wanted to highlight that. Perhaps we should have presented that earlier, but that just gives us a framework of what they're actually stating.
It is tendentious statement because as I have written to the council, they don't have the slightest evidence to predicate a motivation on these heterogeneous group of people.
So the objection is that the way they presented, because they're basing it on the survey, I assume, this travel survey, and
Yes,
and
but
the object and
the survey says nothing about the motivation of their respondents.
yeah, the objection is that it's on the face of it discriminatory against those groups, but in particular, for our purposes, Christians, because they because they're ascribing a motivation to these aren't their words, but to worry about their freedoms. What
Yeah.
was the exact phrase, Robert? Sorry, you put it in front of you.
Um, this group, this composite group of people will generally consider their freedoms associated with driving are being compromised, though individual views may vary.
that will generally consider the
So
freedom associated with driving will be
freedom
predicate of
associated
the
with driving.
the predicate of the sentence has no evidence behind it whatsoever.
And that's because the travel survey only looked at people's travel habits, but not their attitudes towards.
The travel survey does not bring in freedom or sense of freedom or what people consider at all. It is just asking about their behaviour.
Behavior, right?
One wonders what's going to be in the next survey. Whether there will be questions about motivation now, but
Yeah.
they do not have the right to attribute to Christians those things.
So the discriminatory nature is that they've made assumptions about the attitudes of groups with particular protected characteristics, in particular Christians, for our
Yes,
purposes, a base.
unsubstantiated assertions, and one would also say unsubstantiated generalizations, because the whole thing is about generalization, which the thrust of the Equality Act is against.
And
It's
the
against stereotyping people.
Yeah, and the discrimination is in that there is an implied negativity and trouble, and as you put it, although it's of course your word troublemaker. Um, there's an
I cannot back up the term troublemaker because I have not been able to find the source of that.
but the objection is that to the sentence is that the discrimination is that it's discriminatory because there's an implied it's implied that the groups that they're talking about here are troublemakers in that they are the ones who are going to object to their driving-based freedoms being interfered with. That's the nub of it, is it?
They are stereotyped as using cars more. Cars are the problem, as some people in the council obviously see it, for traffic management in the council area.
Yes, although they've got evidence they use cars more, I think, although maybe you're questioning that as well. But even if we take that for granted, the objection is that even if they do use cars more, that it's discriminatory because they're making assumptions about their attitudes based on their behavior. Is that right?
Yeah, yes, that's why the statement is tendentious. It's aiming at people without any reason at all.
Yeah.
Because
The
we
reason I
don't
keep using the word
know
discriminatory.
their motives. Mind you, I don't see why freedom should be a bad motive in the UK today, or perhaps the Bill of Rights has been forgotten.
The reason why I keep using the word discriminatory is because with the Commission of Inquiry into Discrimination against Christians, so for it to be under remit, it needs to be discriminatory. It needs to be regarded as discriminatory, which is why I keep using that word. I appreciate that you're reluctant to use it, but that is our remit, unless Robert wants to say
Can I
something
just
about that.
add, that is our remit, but our remit is a little wider than that. The word injustice also features within our remit. So if someone is presenting evidence to show that there is injustice shown towards a Christian or Christians, that alongside that, in addition to or separate from discrimination, can also feature within our remit.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
It is certainly unjust and unfair to include those categories as the ones who are seeking to assert Christian, well, not Christian, freedom by their use of cars. So they just cannot make that statement.
Can I ask about the travel survey, because we've talked about how they've gone beyond what their survey shows, which is a survey of behaviour to make insinuations about attitudes. Do you also question, if I understood you correctly, that the travel survey actually shows that Christians do disproportionately drive? Do you question what it says about their behaviour, Christians' behaviour, or do you accept that?
No, I don't accept the behaviour. That's why I gave you their statistics in my opening statement. Um, it's impossible, certainly without rigorous statistical testing, to say there's any significant difference between Christians and no religionists.
Right. Those statistics you gave in the opening statement, are they the same as the ones in your emails to the complaints to the council? I had tried to find them, but I couldn't find them, but that might be because I wasn't looking in the right place. Or are they new statistics?
Sorry, you couldn't find what?
The statistics you quoted in your opening statement, are they the same statistics that you put in your complaint email letter to the council, or is that statistics that you they were presenting for the first time?
Yes, I analysed the survey report, um, which I got no serious response, except to use the equality card.
And are the statistics that you presented in your opening statement to us, are they the same statistics that you presented to the council? In your letter, in your email of Wednesday, March the 20th to the council, you listed a number of statistics. Are those the same statistics? I was just trying to work out whether they were the same ones or not. If you're not sure, then just say not sure.
Um, um, some of the same, because don't forget, I'm also going to gender, etc. Um,
Okay.
but I got no response to this analysis.
So the statistics you presented let's put it another way. The statistics you presented in your opening statement to us, have you presented those to the council?
Well, they're their own statistics, it's not they can't claim ignorance to be um, an excuse.
Did you include them in any email to them? Okay, don't worry. So can you just remind us again what you think the key statistics are that show, maybe give one or two
Well,
examples
for
that
instance,
show that
number 6 in my list, the percentage of those travelling by car as passenger had few significant differences.
Okay, so can you just remind us again about the statistics that show that Christians are not that Christians do not disproportionately drive. That's the key statistic for our purposes, I think.
Well, the conclusion of my analysis is you have not shown any evidence that people who proportionately drive more are men, middle-aged groups, people without a disability, white, British, heterosexuals, and Christians.
Okay.
They
So,
haven't shown it, and
okay,
they
so
haven't responded on any count to say uh, that their decision and that statement were justified. They haven't
right.
done it.
So that's your conclusion. Can you just remind us about statistics in particular that show that Christians is there two, maybe one, two, maybe three key statistics that you use for that conclusion that show that conclusion? Just remind us.
I don't know what the question is.
So you've concluded that they haven't shown that Christians drive disproportionately more than other groups. Can you just remind us of the specific statistics that show that? Because it's quite important give it for for the claim.
Well, as I said, there is a difference of 6 percentage points in those who are travelling by car, uh, but that is counterbalanced by 45 um, percent and 3 percentage points difference who are travelling in a car as a passenger.
Okay, can you just give those give the
There's very little difference in car usage by
okay.
Christians. Then is the fact, they say it is a fact, that Christians are proportionately much older than people of no religion, etc., etc. So,
Yeah. So can you
so
just
they don't have any justification for picking out Christian.
okay? So what is the so what are the categories? Do we have? I have. Forgive me, I'm not familiar with the travel survey. What questions did they ask? What do we have statistics on? Do we have statistics on the proportion of Christians who drive? Do we have that statistic?
Yes,
Okay, so what is that statistic?
they do.
What is the proportion of Christians that drive?
And um, those who are passengers.
Okay, and so what is the proportion of Christians who drive?
Let me go straight. Well, I've already given it twice. Um,
Oh, I'm sorry. I must have. I just must be missing it.
they include religion in some of their um, questionnaire, but not all. So I don't know what's going on there. But I can quote the tables for you.
Thank you.
Frequency of travel as car or van driver. Again, the whole methodology of their survey is up for grabs here. Christian 83, no religion 77.
I see. And so it's 83 versus 77. And so your argument is that that's only a difference of 6 percentage points.
Which is counterbalanced by the frequency of um, travel by car as a or van as a passenger.
Okay, so what's this aspect?
There are 3 percentage points different.
What are those statistics, please?
48% for no religion and 45% for Christian in figure 4.
Right, so 48% of no religion travel as a passenger in a car
Correct.
versus 45% for a Christian. So fewer drivers passengers, fewer riders passengers. And are you saying that those differences are small, 3% and 6%, 6 percentage points, and that there's no, are you saying that there's no controlling for age, for example?
There
And
is there is no controlling whatsoever.
okay, so there's no controlling for age,
What the
and
only thing they do say is below figure 3 is that significant testing shows a correlation between deprivation and frequent use of driving by car. So in other words, we're talking about well, they
okay.
haven't said Christians are a priori more wealthy. They've got no data there.
So they say that Christians are more likely, they admit that Christians are more likely to be older. Is that correct?
Yep, they
But
say
they
that.
don't, but they don't control. But when they take the proportion of Christians who drive, they don't control for that factor, for example.
They
Is that
certainly
correct?
don't. They hardly do any controlling.
And are there any,
This is the only place where I've found a reference to significant testing, and they give no figures.
and do they give any confidence intervals?
Sorry,
Do they give any confidence intervals?
no confidence in levels at all.
Okay. So,
And all they've got from whatever they did, we don't know, is a correlation between deprivation and frequent use of driving. So,
So, right.
so that is singling out one factor. No
So
doubt, if they could single out the Christian factor, they would have given that as a
right.
significant correlation.
So they have failed. They have failed to undertake any kind of statistical analysis that would be able to single out a factor like being Christian. It could
They have
easily, it
they
could,
have alluded.
it could easily be attributable entirely to another factor such as age, which they themselves admit Christians are older, and therefore they have provided no statistical basis for singling out Christians as being more likely, disproportionately likely to drive, and therefore to be included in this category, which could easily be interpreted as being troublesome in terms of the policy that they're trying to that they're keen to implement. Would that be fair?
They have used no statistical tools whatsoever in regard to Christians,
Okay.
according to the report.
Just before we move on from this, which I'm sure you'll be relieved.
Apart from percentages, of course.
Um, yeah, the raw percentages, but with no consideration of the clearly confounding factors that they themselves acknowledge in terms, for example, age. Um, just one final question on this. I think it's the final question for me anyway. On the data that is. You mentioned earlier that
You asked about the age. I can quote page 6. Differences occurring between sexual orientation and religion are likely to be linked to age.
okay, so they admit that.
Brackets. Therefore, there are higher proportions of non-heterosexual respondents amongst younger age groups and higher proportions of Christian respondents amongst older age groups. So
Right.
there you can. They don't give any figures.
No. So in the
Um,
small
but
print,
there you can see that they are contrasting um, non-heterosexual as younger and Christians as being older.
yeah. So they acknowledge that that age is a confounding factor and may well explain all the differences, and yet they still choose to highlight that Christians are more likely to be people who supposedly, and then they tendentiously, as you say, did in speculate on on the motives that would come from their behaviour, and say they're more likely to essentially to oppose the policy. Yeah, so that.
Well, I really don't think the motivation between these categories has much to do with it at all. If if you have an older sector of the population, they are more likely to have the means to use car transport than those who've just come out of school.
Yeah, it's confounded by age, absolutely. And so my last question was earlier. I think in your opening statement you mentioned that there was some statistic about, I can't remember what it was now, that reversed in numbers, possibly the proportion of respondents who were Christians and no religion, maybe something like that. That reversed in. You said that it reversed in in the numbers once they'd done some
Uh,
kind of
the weighting that they did
the weighting. Okay,
on page 57.
so they've carried out some kind of weighting. So can you just say a little bit more about the weighting that they've carried out, and explain why that isn't adequate
Well,
to explain to make up for this difference?
I didn't see any justification for the weighting. I may have overlooked something, but weighting doesn't come up at all. They just waited.
And can you remind us what they weighted, please?
They oh table 2 gives a proportion of responses in BCP compared to the population. So they have weighted they they have weighted the respondents according to whether they live in Bournemouth, Christchurch, or Poole, and responses have been weighted by age to make them representative of the BCP population.
I see. So they have taken into account that people who are older might have been more likely to respond to the survey, and they have probably something like proportionately reduced the responses from
Yeah,
older people
so
to.
they have reduced by older people, but then they are condemning Christians who are older people for what they do.
Right. And the the statistics you gave us a few minutes ago about the proportion of Christians and no religion who don't, sorry, who drive, that's right, isn't it? Who drive, yeah, it was 63 and 77 or something, or was it 83 and 77, something like that. Those statistics, they were after the weighting, were they? That was a post-weighted.
I I assume they are post weighted.
Oh, actually, no, they wouldn't need weighting anyway, would it? Because it was just proportion. If they just had 1,000 Christians respond,
So if they are going to strike off a certain proportion of um, older people as being unrepresentative of the whole population, I mean, again, this begs, if you're weighting these things, why don't you weight um, um, the protected characteristics for being unrepresentative of the whole population?
um,
Contradictory.
oh, I think yeah, they're probably just waiting them to try to get them to try. They're probably waiting them to try to make up for, say, older people being more likely to respond or something like that. But but in terms of the proportion who drive, they wouldn't need to weight it because they're just taking a percentage of how many of the respondents say they drive and don't drive who are Christian. So that's probably doesn't that probably yeah, we can ignore that.
There's a relevant
Okay.
sentence here on page 4. Differences between overall responses and groups of respondents, I don't know what that means, have been highlighted in the report where they are large enough to represent a statistically significant difference.
Oh, that's interesting. So
What,
there is.
can I finish, please? Where no differences are stated. This means that no statistically significant differences exist, or the total number of responses from the target group was too small to draw any reliable conclusions. Well, they they haven't shown any of this statistical working.
Right. May I say something?
They,
They,
yeah, go ahead.
thank you. So they are implying there that there has been some statistical analysis of the confidence intervals and statistical
None
significance,
of it has been shown.
but they haven't shown it
None
yet.
of it has been shown. And when you're talking about a correlation between two factors, driving an age or whatever, that proves nothing because you have to do a multifactorial analysis. Correlation is between the independent variable and a host of other variables.
Right. Um, can I ask another question, Robert, or do you want to go to someone else? I want to move on. I want to
Yeah,
move on.
would you mind if we paused it for now because I want to move to Ian?
Yeah, that's
Now,
fine.
thank you, Will, for your questions. Just before we do that, just 2 points. First of all, thank you, Will, for raising the public sector equality duty at the beginning, because I was going to ask Ben about that. Can I just ask a very brief question before we move to Ian? I think it's in your correspondence, Ben, you say that this, and I quote, the survey overrepresented people over 55 who formed 55% of those surveyed. Is it possible to highlight where in the report, either a page number or a section of the report, where we can find that, please?
I'm trying to look trying to see where I have said that.
Oh, I've got it here, Ben. It was in your email to the complaints officer. I'm just looking for a date. There isn't a date here, but it's in the, or actually, yes, it is. It's the 19th of March. It's part of a trail of emails on the 19th of March. It's in a
Well,
Word, you
I
sent
got
it in a
the
Word
11th of
document.
April.
You sent it in a Word document, not a PDF.
Yes, we're not sure how they did their weighting. What I'm saying here is that people over 55 formed 55% of those surveyed.
Right, is there a page number though you can direct us to in the survey where it states that?
Um, that will be their analysis of respondents. Respondent profile.
If you think it's going to take a while, we're happy for you to do this in your own time, and you can direct that information to us at some point over the coming days if that's helpful to you.
Here we are, page 57.
Okay.
You can see that it gives the age of respondents between 55 and 64 years and over 65 years. Um, there will be a difference between the weighting and the unweighting.
Okay. Thank you, Ben. Can we move on to the next lot of questions from Ian? Ian,
Yes.
would you like to ask your questions now? Thank you.
Thank you, Ben, for your evidence. I'm trying to get at what what you think the approach of the council is here. And are you saying that what they're thinking is that in championing supposedly disadvantaged minorities, it is handy to have some supposedly privileged minorities that you can safely disparage by contrast? Is that how you would characterize what they're coming from, how they're coming from?
Well, it's extremely difficult to generalize on the data available.
I mean, do you think they're coming at it with a moral hierarchy of worthiness, amongst identity groups. So LGBT might be worthy of accommodating, whereas Christians are a powerful group who perhaps should be put a little bit in their place. Is that sort of
Well,
thinking
it
you
would
imagine
appear that
behind?
within the council workers there is a hierarchy of values and ratings um, between the different groups of people that they have categorized from their office. Um, and from that quote I gave you just before figure 2, I think, um, they contrast the older Christian with the younger um, non-heterosexual people. So that is certainly a clue of where somebody is coming from.
So the equality impact assessment, I think we said that maybe there were about 3 protected characteristics which weren't really covered by it. So maybe they're skewed towards certain protected characteristics, and within those protected characteristics, they're more interested or more favorable towards some minorities, some identities,
I'm sorry,
rather than others.
your voice is um, is very fused. The words are not coming out distinctly at all.
Well, I'll try to speak more slowly, or try to speak more loudly. Um, in the equality impact assessment, I think you said that there were some protected characteristics which weren't addressed, and within the protected characteristics that were addressed, religion and age, there was a skewing, a favoring towards some minorities rather than others.
Yes,
Can you hear me?
which is inevitably so, because there's a whole range of different categories. The question is, whose rights do you privilege?
So, so are you saying that there is a ranking that is not made explicit, but it is implicit, and we can read it into what they produce in this report? Um, and Robert read out that section about white British heterosexual Christians, etc., um, considering their freedoms being compromised. So I'm trying to maybe put words in your mouth. Are you saying that there is an agenda that skews, distorts what is in the Equality Act um, through an identitarian worldview that is ranking these characteristics, and and that maybe they should be making it more explicit if they're
Well,
being
they
more
better be more
explicit.
explicit because then they would be held up for discrimination. But
Indeed.
clearly, there. I mean, I can't put it any stronger on the evidence that I've said. The report, and especially the council policy emerging from it, is tendentious. What their motives are, um, one cannot be entirely sure. There are just clues.
The clues are pointing to there being good identities and bad identities, within the worldview of people in the council producing this report?
Well, the statement gives it by picking out, without any multivariate analysis, being white, British, heterosexual, older male, and whatever else they said, um, as the problem, and their sense of freedom. When they pick out this range, it clearly shows that somebody doesn't like them because they do not have evidence to make that sentence. Whether it's the subject or the object. They've done no multivariance analysis, so on what basis do they pick out those categories? Most of which are minorities, by the way. Male is no doubt a minority. In Bournemouth, Christians are a minority according to their weighting, etc., etc. I expect white British is a majority.
Yes.
But white British is, as we've seen again and again, night after night, increasingly unfashionable in this country, which is why the report is contentious.
Can I just go back to the statistics you gave, the survey? The numbers of people who responded. Now, just looking at the figures you gave, it looked as though the Christian respondees were deflated by 14%, and the non-religion respondees were inflated by 14%. And so you're saying the reason for this, do I understand it is age, or was it whether they actually lived within the area of Bournemouth?
I don't know what you're referring to.
I think the figure you gave, number of Christian respondents in the survey was 1685, and then after weighting that was reduced to 1445, which is a 14% reduction.
Yeah.
And likewise, the non-religion respondents were increased by 14%.
Yeah.
And can you just say again the reason for this? Is it clear? Is it spelt out very clearly what the reason for that adjustment was?
No.
I think
All they did was they, as I've said, they weighted according to age. And what was the other one? But not according to religion or any other factor.
was it also according to location, whether the respondent actually lived within the area of Bournemouth?
Responses have been weighted by age. I can't see the other one now.
Are they not just weighting them by the proportion of the population by that demographic? So they've gone, oh, we've got, say, 60% of respondents above 60, but 40% of the population is above 60. So we will reduce the proportions accordingly. Is that not what they've done? That's what I understood.
Okay, so it's an age.
Page 4 mentions age only. So presumably all respondents have been weighted by age.
Okay. Okay, so it's by age. Thank you. Yeah. That's my questions dealt with at the moment. Yeah.
Sorry, Ian, you said something, I didn't hear that.
Sorry, that I've finished my questions for the moment.
Okay,
Thank
lovely. Will, you had one other question earlier. Did you want to ask that now?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I wanted to ask about where things are up to now with the complaints. So it looks like from what you've sent us, or at least what I've received, that you have you complained, did a first complaint and then escalated it to a second level, and I think they've said that the next thing you have to do, if you want to take it further, is take it to the Ombudsman. You've also raised the prospect of it being actionable under the Equality Act, which would be legal action, of course. Can you just say a little bit about what action, what you've done so far, and what you're thinking of doing next?
Well, I've gone as far as I can with the council. They say the next level is the Ombudsman, from which it's very difficult to get any joy, and court. I'm not planning to do either.
Okay, thank you.
Because the risk, no doubt, of being caught is that, which is highly unpredictable, the best of times, which is why barristers say you've only got a 50% chance of winning, or 51%, even when it's a dead cert case. And if you don't win, you have to pay the council's costs. Which
Yeah,
I couldn't do.
and you've got no plans to take it to the Ombudsman. Okay, thank you.
In regard to the weighted figures for age, even with the weighted figures, the older people, that is above 55, come out at 52% of the number of respondents.
Is it 52%, or as you said in your email to the council, 55%?
55% I expect is the unweighted figures, but even with the weighted figures, you've got 52%. Which means, as you might expect, that Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole has a very aged community. So why bomb them with the Equality Act? They're more likely to be unhealthy, disabled, have blue badges. That's something they haven't counted for.
Okay, can I, Will, did you have any further need to ask any question, or did you ensure that all of that was addressed?
It just occurred to me that I didn't ask why Dr. Knighton isn't thinking of taking it to the Ombudsman, if he wanted to say that. But other than that, that's everything.
Thanks.
Well, my previous experience of ombudsmen over the decades is highly unpromising. Long drawn out, involves a lot of work, and then they usually find in defense of the institution. for unknown reasons.
Thank you.
Okay. I'd like to just ask a few more questions. Ben, earlier you said, if I heard you correctly, that the council, you say, has not done a multivariant analysis. If I heard you
Multivariate
correctly.
analysis.
Sorry?
Multivariate analysis.
Is that
If you're
variant?
going to talk about correlation, you can't just do a correlation between two variables as if there were no other factors involved, because this is why the whole survey is of limited value, because a multivariate analysis is not done. All the factors coming into driving, traffic, etc., is not given. How much is due to age? How much is due to religion? How much is due to disability? We don't know without multivariate analysis, and of course that only has certain confidence levels. So you can't just take two variables and say that the two of them are correlated. That's a non-starter in terms of statistics.
My question was, and I think you've probably answered this, what does a multivariate analysis look like if it were done properly? You gave a few examples. Did you want to add anything more in terms of what it ought to look like if it's done correctly,
It would,
in your view?
as I've said before, it would include all likely factors involved. And they've listed all the factors here: age, disability, ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation, employment, and area. Well, have you seen any attempt, even any allusion to including all those variants, multivariant, in explaining the traffic in BCP?
Right.
It's not there.
Okay.
And therefore, that's another reason why the sentence that they come up with is totally tendentious. Why have you picked out those variables?
Okay. Can I just ask a couple of other questions? Thanks for that further explanation. You told us prior to this hearing in the documentation that there were some press reports on this subject. Can you tell
Yes.
us who reported the case, just a few names, and also what they said, how they handled this particular story?
Well, Voice for Justice was the initial one I saw, and they used the term about troublemakers, which I couldn't find anywhere else. Then I mostly went to the Bournemouth Echo.
Right.
And oh yes, I quoted the Times about 20 miles an hour.
And how did these other press outlets, did you say the Times and the Bournemouth Echo?
Well, not regarding Christians with the Times.
What was the focus of
I
the
also
Bournemouth Echo?
cited the British Medical Journal, but in terms of the offending statements, I went to the Bournemouth Echo and saw and looked up everything about the issue.
And did the Bournemouth
Well,
Echo
the reasons
report on
and the
the
reasons
Christian
for.
angle? Sorry. Did the Bournemouth Echo report on the Christian angle of this story?
Not specifically,
No.
because, as we know, it is dumped in with all the other chosen um, equality considerations.
Okay. I just have one final question. In one of the emails from the complaints officer at the council, you were offered an apology for what they described as the unintended impact that the report has had on you.
Yes,
Um,
unintended, but
what would be your thoughts?
there are enough clues to say that it was intentional by somebody at least to strike at and whoever approved the report, white British male Christians, etc. Obviously, nobody intended to offend me. This is the difference between the individual and the mass. I'm only an individual. I don't expect a council to be intending to offend me. But I am sure that I'm not the only one who is offended by the statement that was reported.
Okay. Are there any further questions from Will or Ian? I've seen a nod from Will. Ian? No. Ben, did you want to say any further things that you want to clarify? Anything that's been unsaid before we close the meeting?
I don't think so. We've given it a good airing, but I would just like to say that this is one more attack or attempt to surpass what was British culture. And one sees so many nowadays on wherever you turn. What is British culture now? I don't know, but I don't think it should be determined by a minority.
Okay, so if there are no further questions, can I say thank you, Ben, for giving your time to uncover this for us, and thank you to my fellow commissioners and the CDAC secretary for participating in this. Thank you for your time.